By the time Jaewon's car turned into our driveway, Sulin's father had already lost everything. His accounts were frozen. His businesses were gone. His allies had vanished overnight like smoke. Every connection he had spent 20 years building had been quietly cut, one by one, in the space of a single week. All that was left was his daughter, walking into my home, thinking she was about to take it. I watched the headlights from the upstairs window. My coffee was warm in my hands. My heart was steady. People always made the same mistake with me. They saw a quiet woman standing beside a powerful man, and they assumed the power belonged to him. It never occurred to them that a woman could smile through 8 years of marriage, manage an empire's entire financial structure, and still have enough left in reserve to destroy an entire criminal family before breakfast. Sulin's father had sent her here to take my husband and my home. He should have done his research first. I set down my coffee, smoothed my dress, and walked downstairs. The door wasn't going to open itself. "Welcome, sweetheart. I have been waiting." Sulin stepped out of the car like she owned the ground beneath her feet. She was beautiful. I will give her that. Sharp features, straight black hair, a designer coat that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She carried herself with the particular confidence of a woman who had never once been told no. Jaewon stepped out behind her, tall, powerful, dressed in his dark coat. He looked up at the house first, the way he always did when he came home. But tonight, something was different. There was tension in his shoulders, a stiffness that told me he had spent the entire drive preparing himself for this moment. He had no idea there was nothing to prepare for. I had already won. What Jaewon didn't know was that Sulin was not just a woman he had fallen for. She was the eldest daughter of Chairman Park, the man who had been quietly trying to absorb Jaewon's empire for 3 years. Every dinner, every weekend trip, every whispered promise she had made to my husband had been a carefully calculated move designed by her father. She was not a mistress. She was a weapon. And she had just walked into the home of the woman who had already dismantled her. I opened the door before they could knock. That was the first thing that shook her. Sulin had prepared herself for a wife who didn't know, a woman she could look at with hidden victory in her eyes. Instead, she found me standing in the doorway, perfectly dressed, completely calm, smiling like I had been expecting them both for days. Because I had. "Welcome home, my love." I stepped aside for Jaewon. Then I turned to her. "And you must be Sulin. Please come in. I have been looking forward to meeting you." Her step faltered, just slightly, just enough for me to see it. Jaewon said nothing. His eyes were searching my face desperately for anger, for tears, for any of the emotions a betrayed wife was supposed to show. He found nothing but warmth and perfect composure. That frightened him more than anything else could have. I led them both into the dining room, where the table was already set for 3, candles lit, wine poured, food warm and waiting. Sulin looked at the 3 place settings, and something shifted behind her eyes. For the first time since arriving, she was not sure she was winning. We sat at the table like civilized people. Jaewon at the head, me to his right, Sulin across from me with her hands folded carefully in her lap, and her eyes moving between us like a woman recalculating everything she thought she knew. I served the food myself, even her plate. "Grace," Jaewon started. "Eat while it's hot," I said pleasantly. Sulin lifted her fork but didn't eat. She was watching me too carefully, looking for cracks, looking for the pain underneath the smile. She was trained to read people. Her father had made sure of that. But she had never sat across from a woman like me before. "You seem very calm," she finally said. "I'm very calm," I agreed. Most women wouldn't be. Most women wouldn't have done what I did this week either. I sipped my wine, but here we are. Her fork stopped moving. Jaewon looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" I smiled at him gently. "It means dinner is lovely, and we should enjoy it." I set down my glass. We have all night to talk about everything else." The silence that followed was the most powerful thing I had ever said without saying anything at all. After dinner, I excused myself briefly and let them sit together. "I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that was a mistake, that I should have stayed and watched. But I didn't need to watch. I already had people watching for me." Mr. Cho had been in the security room since they arrived. Every room in that house had ears I had personally installed 18 months ago, the moment I first noticed the shifts in Jae-won's behavior and started preparing for what might be coming. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh glass of water, and listened through the small earpiece in my left ear. Sulin was whispering urgently, "She knows something. We need to move faster." Ye-won's voice was confused. "Move faster with what?" A pause. "My father needs the account transfer completed by Friday. You promised him." "I promised you I would think about it." "There is no more time to think." I set down my glass very quietly. So there it was. Friday. They needed the accounts by Friday. It was currently Tuesday. I had moved everything out of those accounts on Saturday. I walked back to the dining room smiling. That night I waited until the house was completely quiet. Ye-won had gone to his study. I had shown Sulin to the guest room with fresh towels and a warm smile that left her deeply unsettled. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and made the call I had been saving for exactly this moment. He answered on the first ring. "Is it time?" Mr. Cho asked. "It's time," I said quietly. What happened in the next 4 hours would never make the news. It never does when things are done correctly. But by 2 o'clock in the morning, Chairman Park's remaining financial structures had been reported to 3 separate government agencies by sources that could never be traced back to me. His last 2 operating accounts were flagged and suspended pending investigation. His most powerful ally, a man who had protected the Park family for 15 years, had received information that made him withdraw that protection permanently and quietly. Chairman Park had sent his daughter to destroy my husband's empire. By the time she woke up the next morning, her father no longer had one. I set my phone down, turned off my lamp, and slept like a woman with nothing left to worry about. Sulin's phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. I heard it through the wall, frantic, back-to-back calls that went on for 20 minutes straight, then silence, then a single sharp sound that might have been a sob. I was already dressed when she came downstairs. Her composure was cracked for the first time. Her eyes were red at the edges, and her hands were not quite steady as she gripped her phone. Jae-won was in the kitchen reading the morning news and hadn't yet understood what he was looking at. I poured 3 cups of coffee like nothing had happened. "You destroyed him." Sulin's voice was low and tight when she looked at me across the kitchen. Not a question. A realization. "I protected my home," I said simply. "My father made a choice." I set her coffee in front of her gently. "He sent you here to take something that wasn't yours. I simply made sure he paid for that decision." Ye-won looked up slowly from his newspaper. Something was shifting behind his eyes as the pieces began assembling themselves into a picture he hadn't been prepared to see. "Grace," he said carefully, "what did you do?" I told him everything. Not with anger, not with tears. I sat across from my husband at our kitchen table, with my hands folded and my voice level, and I told him exactly what Sulin was, exactly who her father was, and exactly what they had both been planning to do to him. Ye-won listened without speaking. His face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, then a slow and devastating understanding that settled over him like something heavy. Sulin said nothing. There was nothing left to say. When I finished speaking, the kitchen was completely silent. Then Jae-won turned to look at Sulin. Really, look at her. Not the way a man looks at a woman he chose. The way a man looks at something he narrowly escaped. "Is it true?" he asked her. She lifted her chin. My father needed. Is it true? He repeated, quietly, finally. She looked away. That was answer enough. Ye Wan stood up slowly. He straightened his jacket with the careful movements of a man trying to hold himself together. Then he walked to the door of the kitchen and stopped without turning around. Get out of my house, he said. Don't make me say it twice. Su Lin left within the hour. She packed her single bag with the rigid movements of a woman swallowing something she cannot spit out. I stood in the hallway as she came downstairs, not to gloat, not to confront her, simply to make sure she left completely. At the door she stopped and turned to look at me one final time. I expected anger. Instead, I saw something that surprised me, something that looked almost like reluctant respect. How long did you know? She asked. Long enough, I said. You could have stopped it earlier, before my father lost everything. Yes, I agreed. I could have. She understood then. I hadn't just been protecting myself. I had been sending a message to her father. To anyone else who might ever look at what Jae-won and I had built and think it was available for the taking. The message was simple. Come from my home, and I will leave you with nothing to return to. She walked out without another word. I closed the door softly behind her, locked it, then stood in the quiet hallway for a long moment with my hand flat against the door. It was over. Now the harder part began. He found me in the garden that afternoon. I was doing what I always did when I needed to think, tending the roses I had planted our first year in that house. Stubborn, beautiful things that bloomed every season without being asked. Yewan sat on the bench without speaking for a long time. I almost handed everything to her family, he finally said. I almost destroyed everything we built. Yes, I said simply. You almost did. How did you know before I did? Because I pay attention, Jae-won. I have always paid attention. To this house, to this empire, to you. I set down my shears. You stopped paying attention to me. That was your mistake. He was quiet for a long moment. I thought she cared about me. She cared about your assets. And you? His voice was low. After everything, why did you protect me too? You could have let it all fall. I looked at him steadily. Because this empire has my fingerprints on every wall. I didn't build it with you for 8 years to watch someone else's daughter take it. He nodded slowly, eyes down. A powerful man, made very small by the weight of what he had nearly done. I'm sorry, Grace, he whispered. I am deeply sorry. I gave Jae-won 1 week before I spoke to him seriously. 7 days of distance. 7 days of letting him sit with the full weight of what had happened and what it had nearly cost him. He needed to understand it completely before I was willing to have the conversation that would decide everything. When I finally called him into the sitting room, I was calm and clear. I am not leaving, I said, but things will be different. He nodded immediately. Anything. My name goes on everything, not quietly in the background the way it has been. Officially, publicly, every business, every holding, every decision of significance goes through me visibly. Done, he said without hesitation. Mr. Cho answers to me, not you, not anymore. Agreed. And if there is ever another woman. I paused. Let the silence hold the weight of what I didn't need to finish. There won't be, he said. His voice was stripped of everything except sincerity. I studied him for a long moment. 8 years of marriage had taught me how to read every version of this man, the powerful one, the proud one, the one who made terrible decisions, and the one who knew it. This was the one who knew it. Then we move forward, I said quietly. 3 months later, the empire had a new name on the door. Not just Jae-won's, mine. The announcement ran in every major financial publication on a Tuesday morning. By noon, my phone had received 47 messages from people who had spent years looking past me at board meetings and company dinners. People who had shaken Jaewon's hand and barely glanced in my direction. They were glancing now. Jaewon stood beside me at the press conference with his hand at the small of my back and something in his eyes that looked like pride, real pride, the kind that costs a man something to feel. Chairman Park was awaiting trial. Sulin had left the country quietly. And I was exactly where I had always been, at the center of everything I had built, except now the world could finally see it. A reporter asked me afterward what it felt like to step into the public role. I smiled at her. Step in? I thought. Darling, I never left. Solene came with a plan. Her father came with power. Jaewon came with a choice. And Grace came with patience. The kind of patience that dismantles empires before breakfast and still has dinner on the table by evening. Remember her name, because women like Grace don't just survive betrayal, they turn it into a throne.